I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman John Rutherford. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brittany. It's great to be with you.
And I want to talk about this slew of bipartisan bills you are currently working on, and they all center around law enforcement. You said earlier law enforcement is your life calling. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah, well, as you know, I was a law enforcement officer for 41 years in Northeast Florida there in Jacksonville. And I was a sheriff for 12 years. And what a lot of people don't know about my law enforcement career is that during that time as sheriff, I also happened to be the legislative chair for the Florida Sheriff's Association. All 67 sheriffs come together in an association, and we have a legislative committee that would lobby Tallahassee for criminal law. And so I wound up chairing that committee for 9 years of my 12 years as sheriff, because we had some tremendous success. And I'll share a quick story with you because it's really kind of funny, and it really informs how I've decided to do business here in D.C. And that is, so as a new sheriff in 2003, the first thing that I wanted to do was, I was just appalled at the number of severely mentally ill and severely addicted that we had in our jails that really needed treatment. They did not need incarceration, they needed treatment. Yet they're sitting in our jails because we didn't have community services for them. And so I drafted a bill that would move these people out of the criminal justice system and into community treatment wherever we could find it. And so I took this bill to the Florida Sheriff's Association Legislative Committee and tried to get it on the agenda for that year's legislative session. And since I was the new guy, it's like, well, sorry, John, no room on the agenda, So I said, well, look, I've got a great bill. It's going to save lives. It's going to save money. I'll run it on my own. I don't need your help, because I knew I had a great bill. And so I ran that bill and it failed. And I tell people now, I was so naive back then, I thought bills actually passed on their merit.
Why did the bill fail?
Well, that's what I asked myself. Why did a great bill like this fail? And the reason was, Brittany, I didn't have the relationships in Tallahassee to get that bill passed. I had the relationships back home. I had all the networks back home, but I didn't have them in Tallahassee. So I spent the next year traveling the state of Florida, spending a whole lot of time in Tallahassee, talking to the not just the members there, but even more importantly, I think their staff, and really telling people what this bill was all about. I think I hit every newspaper, editorial board. Thankfully, the Florida sheriff in Jacksonville, we had an airplane, so I was able to fly around and get all this done. And so the next year, I go back to Ocala for the Florida Sheriff's Legislative Committee meeting, try to get my bill on the agenda again. Still, sorry, no room. So I said, well, look, let me run it again. I didn't get in your way last time. Let me just do my own thing. And they're like, okay. Well, that bill flew through the House, flew through the Senate. Jeb Bush signed it into law. And when that session was over, the executive director for the Florida Sheriffs came to me and he said, hey, John, the legislative committee just elected you chairman. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know I was running. But I got elected legislative chairman for the Florida Sheriffs Association. And we had such success. It was really all because of those relationships that I had spent over a year building. And so I realized that not only do you have to have a bill with merit, but you've got to have those relationships to get a bill passed. And so the challenge was when I came to Washington, D.C., I run into this partisanship that is just horrible. I mean, the whole system is built to keep us apart, it seems like. And so, in fact, one of the very first experiences I had up here, I wasn't even in office yet. And a fellow says, well, come on, I'll take you to the Capitol Hill Club for lunch. So we go downstairs, and I didn't know what the Capitol Hill Club was. So we go downstairs, but when I get my menu, it doesn't say CHC on it, it says RCHC. So I'm like, damn, what's the R for? And he looked at me like I had three heads. And he said, Republican. And I said, Republican? And I look around this restaurant and I'm like, are you telling me there's no Democrats in here? He's like, hell no, John, they got their place 4 blocks that way. And that was kind of my introduction to Washington, D.C. and the partisanship and the way it's designed almost to keep us apart.
That's really interesting you say that, because that sounds like, at the end of the day, put politics aside, you still want to eat with people on both sides of the aisle. And something that's really heartening about all of the legislation we're about to talk about is that it is bipartisan. And especially with a topic like law enforcement, because within the past few years, both sides of the aisle have accused the other of wanting to defund the police. So why do you think you have been able to find common ground with Democrats when it comes to these issues?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Brittany, that's not been by chance. When I was sitting there with Dan in the Capitol Hill Club, I was aghast. What even concerned me more was he thought nothing of it. He didn't think it was a big deal. I thought it was horrible. And so I made up my mind at that point, I've got to find ways to reach across the aisle. And one of the ways that I came up with was I have not introduced a single bill that I wasn't able to get a Democrat to be a primary, not just a co-sponsor, but a primary co-sponsor. That means their name goes on that bill with mine. Now, I did just have one that I had to file with just my name on it for Red Snapper this year, but this is my 7th year, so we've done pretty good at making them all bipartisan. And I will tell you, Brittany, I think that's the reason for some of our success in getting bills passed. And, we've had several VA bills passed. We've had the Stop School Violence Act of 2018 passed. We've had some really good legislative success, and I think it's because of this strategy of, number one, always having a primary co-sponsor. So that bill no longer is my bill. That's the Rutherford Gottheimer bill. Josh Gottheimer has been on several with me. He's a Democrat, great guy. And so through that process, we've built some good relationships across the aisle. The other thing is, I ran across this caucus that's in D.C. Now, it's not very big. There's only about 30 some odd members, but it's an even balance of Republicans and Democrats. It's called the Bipartisan Working Group. We meet once a week when we're in session, and we focus on things that are always of a bipartisan nature, which law enforcement and crime obviously is. And so we work on that. We work on a lot of infrastructure, things like surprise medical billing. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican patient. If you're getting this surprise medical billing, you've got a problem. And so those are the kind of things that we work on through that process.
Before we dive into the acts specifically in the legislation, I'm curious right now, as of now, are you getting lunch with Democrats?
Yes, we still meet with the bipartisan working group every week. I've got a lot of good Democrat friends. We actually have more cigars together than we do lunch, but that's even better, I think.
Well, that's really heartening to hear.